This lesson is part of 5th grade Social Studies Unit 2, Three Worlds Meet. In this lesson, we will learn about early encounters of European explorers with the native people of North America. Our learning target for this lesson is to use the stories of individual explorers and stories of life in Europe to compare the goals, obstacles, motivations, and consequences for European exploration and colonization of the Americas. We will be able to use the examples of Christopher Columbus to understand the effects of interactions between the early European explorers and the native people of the Americas. These terms are important to know. We will be using them throughout the lesson. An encounter is a meeting between two groups of people. A synonym for encounter is interaction. Anytime two different people or groups of people interact with each other, they are having an encounter. An exchange is the trading of objects or ideas. Sometimes it is a trade that is planned, but exchanges can happen without being planned, such as the exchange of diseases. Slavery was a system that forced people to work and treated the enslaved people as property. To help us meet our learning target of understanding the goals, obstacles, motivations, and consequences of the interactions between European explorers and Native Americans, we will use the example of Christopher Columbus. He was one of the early explorers from Europe. He was born in Italy, the oldest of 5 children. His father was a weaver who also owned a cheese stand. When he was 14, he left school and became an apprentice on a ship. An apprentice is someone who works for low wages while they learn a skill. The skills that he learned as an apprentice eventually led him to decide he wanted to try to sail west across the Atlantic Ocean to find a faster route to Asia. Because it cost a lot of money to get a ship and crew for such a long voyage, he asked the kings and queens of Portugal, England, and France to give him the money for his voyage. They each refused, but the king and queen of Spain finally agreed. Columbus made 4 voyages to the Americas under the Spanish flag, each time thinking he was near Asia. Although he has sometimes been called the person who discovered America, we know that there have been people living in the Americas for over 20,000 years before he arrived. When Columbus and the Native American people encountered each other, many exchanges began to be made between the Old World, Europe, and the New World, America. Some of the exchanges are listed on the chart here. The exchange of goods, plants, animals, diseases, and ideas between the Old World and New World is referred to as the Columbian Exchange. Some of the exchanges had devastating effects on the native people of the Americas. The new plants and animals brought to the New World changed the ecosystems of the islands. The new species overwhelmed the native species. The new diseases brought over by Columbus and his men were also devastating. The native people had no immunity to these new diseases, and entire populations were killed. The consequences of Columbus's voyages to the Americas had a huge impact on 3 continents. The first voyage did not have much contact with Native Americans, but he kidnapped 6 of them and forced them to go back with him to Spain. On his second voyage, there were many encounters. He enslaved 1,600 Native Americans and took 500 back to Spain to be sold as slaves. Eventually, more Native Americans were enslaved. They were forced to work in silver and gold mines. Others were forced to work on plantations. Columbus was very interested in gold. He created a cruel system where the Taino people were required to bring gold on a regular schedule. If they did, they were given a copper token to wear around their neck. If they didn't, and they were found without a copper token, their hand would be chopped off. Sugar was also introduced as another way to make profit. Native Americans were forced to work on sugar plantations. But so many Native Americans had died, there weren't enough Native Americans. So the Spanish went to Africa and brought enslaved Africans back to work on the sugar plantations. To review our learning target, let's apply what we have learned about Christopher Columbus to looking at the goals and motivations, the challenges or obstacles, and the consequences for European exploration and colonization in the Americas. At the top of the graphic organizer, we can see the goals and motivations, including finding new trade routes, claiming land, and finding riches like gold. The challenges faced by explorers included finding rulers to support their voyages, surviving so far from home without food or water, and not having maps from people who'd gone before them. The consequences were many, including forcing Native Americans to work as slaves in mines and on plantations, kidnapping of Native Americans back to Spain, and the beginning of the African slave trade. Click next to take the quiz for this lesson.